The question is simple, but very hard to answer. Is Derek Shelton the guy to manage the Pittsburgh Pirates moving forward? We'll discuss on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Sorry again for missing the show yesterday, but we are back here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. My name is Ethan Smith. You can find me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates from a fan to fans just like you. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You got Steeler games, you got Penguin games, you got all the sports going on right now, basketball, hockey, football, concerts, comedy, theater, and more all over at Game Time. And if you use code LOCKEDONMLB right now, you can get $20 off your first purchase. Don't we all love saving money? So make sure you go to Game Time and do that right now. For starters, happy birthday to myself. I turned 26 years old today. Started this podcast when I was 21, technically. Started it when I was 21, turned 22 shortly after in the year of 2020. So thank you guys for all being along for the ride and having fun on this show as we always do. And I'm really hoping that the rest of this year and going into 2025, we build this thing into something great. So happy birthday to myself. Just saying that off rip. But as you heard at the top of the show, I wanted to talk about Derek Shelton again because he was a hot topic of conversation near the end of the season. The Pirates obviously were in contention, kind of going into the end of July into August when we saw them just a few games out of the wild card. They go get Brian De La Cruz. They go get Kiner Falefa. They go get Jalen Beeks. They technically bought at the deadline. And it kind of felt like the Pirates were finally getting over that hump. And they were finally going to maybe get into the 80-plus win column. That did not happen. They lost 10 games in a row in August, effectively took them out, kind of just stumbled the rest of the way, and finished with the exact same record that they finished with in 2023 at 76-86. So, of course, when all of this started and you look at where it all comes from and what the Pirates were doing, there's a lot of scrutiny being thrown around. Was Derek Shelton going to be the guy moving forward? Was Ben Cherington going to be the guy moving forward? And a lot of people started to point fingers at Derek Shelton at this point because of the track record that we have seen from Derek Shelton. We haven't exactly seen what we would want out of a manager in Derek Shelton. And part of that is, a winning season would be great. But the team that the Pirates had this year versus the team they had that I covered along with all of you and watched along with all of you in 2023 was not really even in the same conversation as far as talent. You look at the pitching staff for starters that the Pirates had in 2024. You had Paul Skeens, you had Jared Jones, you had Mitch Keller, you had other contributors like Luis Ortiz and Bailey Falter that just had really good years. You go back to 2023, and it was a year where you didn't have O'Neal Cruz. You didn't have really much of an offense at all, and you had two starters practically in Mitch Keller and Johan Oviedo, yet we still end up in the same spot record-wise, which at the end of the day, I can come on here and say anything I want. At the end of the day, that is ultimately what matters, is what is your record at the end of the season, and are you playing postseason baseball? That is the ultimate goal here. And when you look at Derek Shelton and his track record and everything that he's brought to the table as a manager of this team, he has managed 708 games for the Pittsburgh Pirates at this point. Ever since I started this show, he's been the manager of the team. He's been the guy. In those 708 games, he has a 294 and 414 record, which amounts to a winning percentage of 415. So he's winning 41% of the time over his time with the Pirates since 2020. That included 2 100-loss seasons back-to-back, 61 and 101, 62 and 100. And the difference between 2023 and 2024, just from the managerial side of these things, I think 2022 so 2020 through 2022, you kind of have to give Shelton a pass. The Pirates did not have any talent whatsoever, and if they did, it was all rentals. So he didn't really have much to really piggyback onto as far as talent was concerned, outside of like the Brian Reynolds of the world and Key Brian Hayes when he was healthy. 2023 came along, and you could still make the argument that the Pirates didn't have the talent level to be a competitive team. Yet in that second half, they found a way to be competitive. I'm not saying they were good, but they were a competitive baseball team. The Leo Pigueros of the world were starting to get their shine. You were starting to see Andy Rodriguez kind of come around a little bit. Johan Oviedo, obviously, who I mentioned earlier, came around a little bit. And then it kind of just gave this feeling going into this year that, oh, well, now you just drafted Paul Skeens. We're hearing about this kid, Jared Jones. It's going to be really good pitching-wise. We're going to get O'Neal Cruz back. Everything's going to be bumping. And it was a bumpy ride, for sure. And the ride eventually just swerved off the road. But I feel like that was the difference here. In 2023, I think you could have applauded the work that Derek Shelton did to improve by 14 games from the year prior. But I think this season, and why we're all so frustrated, especially with a guy like Derek Shelton, is because you had the same exact win-loss record with a much better team, on paper at least. And we obviously saw at the end of the season some firings, like we saw Andy Haynes gone, thank God. But it did puzzle me, though, that Derek Shelton was getting a public endorsement from his general manager and the team. Like, the Pirates were publicly endorsing a guy that, as I mentioned again, is 294 and 414 across his time with the Pirates over 5 seasons. And you look at what's gone on now. You saw the Seattle Mariners in the middle of a playoff race move on from Scott Service. You saw the Cincinnati Reds move on from David Bell when the season was just about to come to a close. And they go and hire Terry Francona. The Chicago White Sox obviously fire their manager, go hire a new guy. And it makes you wonder why the Pirates are deciding that Derek Shelton should have this public endorsement. And it's an interesting conversation to have, because is he the guy? I think he could be, but I can't in confidence say that with the track record that is here. Just from what we've seen over the last 5 years, again, 3 of them, I'll give them a pass, and somewhat 2023 with Cruz going down with injury. This year, the excuses were a little bit harder to throw at him. He couldn't really make excuses for Derek Shelton this year because, again, the talent level was better. The team overall was better, and you were in a position to at least give Pirates fans a microcosm of a thought that we would be playing meaningful baseball in September that could eventually lead to a potential playoff appearance. Instead, you lose 10 games in a row. Some of that, of course, falls on the players. I'm not blaming Shelton entirely on this, but he is a large part of that happening, considering it has now happened in back-to-back seasons and has been the difference in the Pirates being that 80-plus win team that we all want to see. So is he the guy? I still think he has room to prove that. And I think he could still very well prove that. But time might be ticking too. So what are the scenarios that we need to watch for in 2025 as it pertains to Derek Shelton? Because a lot of them involve one common outcome, but there are some that involve others. We'll discuss next on Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5 because you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. And Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. You can join over 10 million users and sign up today. And if you want to play Prize Picks along guys like Drewski, Joe Budden, and MMA champ Sean O'Malley, you can now find those community plays under the promos tab on the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. If you think Justin Jefferson will get more than 83.5 yards next week, go on Prize Picks and go win some free money. Because why not? Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today, use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you can get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every day. After making this your first listen in the afternoon, if you're getting off of work, make sure you listen to Locked On MLB before Game 5 of the World Series. The New York Yankees stayed alive, and Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, over at Locked On MLB, has all your fix for everything you need about the World Series and going into baseball's off season. Pirates have been in off-season mode for about a month now, actually played against the American League pennant winners in the New York Yankees in their final series of the season. The Pirates are the last team to beat the Yankees in a series. Fun stuff, fun little nugget for you there. But we're talking about Derek Shelton today. And I was very much more emotional about Derek Shelton prior to the season ending. And then now I'm kind of ticky-tack on what I want to see here from Derek Shelton and what kind of future that Derek Shelton really has. And I say that because going into 2025, it's a very interesting dynamic that you have because you start to wonder, okay, so what kind of season are we expecting him to have next year? What's going to happen with Derek Shelton if certain things happen, right? Like, what are we going to see? What's going to happen here with a guy like Derek Shelton? And that's where I want to bring up multiple different scenarios because, truthfully, there's many different ways that this can go for Derek Shelton. And you probably heard me mention earlier about saying that he could still very well prove to be the manager that leads the Pirates to that promised land that they want to get to. He can prove that. And he could do that in 2025. He is going to be the manager in 2025. Everything, every motto of what we've heard and everything has all said that he will be the manager. So let's get that out of the way. If he goes into next year, starts hot like he has in the past 2 years, then I think you'll have the same kind of feeling as, oh God, when will it blow up again? Scenario one is where the Pirates just ultimately become a better team. And by better team, I mean in the win column. They stay competitive through a large portion of the season and into September and maybe even make a postseason appearance. If that happens, I think you hold on to Derek Shelton for a little bit because then you start to kind of see the puzzle pieces fall into place. And I think that could very well happen. I mean, We've seen in moments Derek Shelton be a very good manager. We've seen him go on lengthy win streaks. We've seen him have very good months with this team. But we've also, on the flip side, seen the really bad months. But if you go into 2025 and say the Pirates do get to 83, 84, maybe 85 wins, might be a spoiler about my prediction for next year, no matter what happens this offseason, outside of some drastic things that could happen, of course. But he would be fine. And I think a lot of people inherently would still not like him because a large portion of the fan base does already want him gone. And it's warranted because I'll get into the other scenarios in a minute. But I do think that if he was to have a winning year next year and really hone down on it, I do think that you could see Derek Shelton kind of have like a hero arc and just like kind of 180 everything. If he doesn't, though, scenario 2 is if this team is stagnant again, doesn't make the postseason, doesn't even flirt with making the postseason, then he's gone. I mean, period. I just think he's gone at that point, truthfully, and I think he obviously very well should be. And when you look at discussing that, what does that look like? Does that mean 80 wins, 79 wins, something like that? And it is crazy that his job could very well come down to a couple of wins. Truthfully. I mean, it could come down to if he has a 79 and 83 campaign versus an 83 and 79 campaign, the difference in basically a series, that could be the difference in his job. Scenario 3, though, and the one that I think is the most interesting because it would cause the most chaos on this podcast and cause chaos on every social media platform known to man among Pirates fans. But if the Pirates, unlike what they've done in the last 2 years, get off to a shaky start, especially if they go out and make some moves that give us an inclination that they're going to be a better team, which that's a whole topic for another day. If you're looking at that possibility, and this is really where I think all 3 of these come into play. If the Pirates start, 5-10, let's just throw that out there. I think the leash is short for Derek Shelton already. And I think that there's going to be a massive amount of pressure from the first pitch that is thrown in Miami in 2025. I really do. Because to me, he's already on the hot seat. He already that seat should be steaming at this point. And if it's not, again, different conversation for another day. But if he gets off to a slow start, I think that leash is short. And I think you could see the Pirates make a in-season move depending on how the season goes next year. And that's what's so meticulous about all this is that there's so many different things that could happen with this ball club next year. And Derek Shelton will be directly affected by anything that happens. And I'm talking anything. If O'Neal Cruz doesn't work out in center field, Derek Shelton will be the guy, the beneficiary of all the criticism. If Key Brian Hayes doesn't stay healthy, even though it's not Derek Shelton's fault, he'll still be the scapegoat. And let's even say David Bednar doesn't figure it out in the bullpen and they decide to make him the closer again. That's going to inherently direct all the criticism to Derek Shelton. Even though I think he still very well should be the closer. But that's the state of being a manager in baseball. Everything bad that happens to a team will be on the feet of the manager. The manager will be the one that gets criticized. He will be the one that people want on a stake. He will be the one that people want gone first. Because you're not getting rid of Paul Skeens. You're not getting rid of Cruz. You're not getting rid of Reynolds. You're not doing that. So who's going to go first? One of those 3 or the manager? You guys know the answer to that question. I don't have to answer it for you. You know the answer to that question. But a winning season next year, I think, saves his job. And I think a losing season kills his job. But I think he's on a constant microscope from the very first pitch we see in 2025. And I think that leash is going to be very, very short for him. He's going to have to prove it. It's a prove-it league, just like every other sport. It is a results-driven league. That is what baseball is. And if you can't get the results, then it's just unfortunately how it goes. And I think for the Pirates, the results are going to have to come quick, swiftly, and in a very well-ordered manner. Because if they don't, Derek Shelton will be as good as gone. I already know people want him gone. But I'm going to share my thoughts from the fan side of this to end today's show next on Locked On Pirates. As mentioned earlier, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply because Game Time is authorized ticket marketplace, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to your event. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You can get seat views and get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You can always see your total up front with all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off, and download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And welcome to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates, everybody here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates. Again, my name is Ethan Smith. Find me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. And discussing Derek Shelton today and everything to do with Derek Shelton. From my standpoint, from, I'd say, covering this team and more on like the neutral side of things, is that I do want to see Derek Shelton get the chance. I want to see him get the chance to prove himself. I want to see him go out in 2025 and do well. Anybody that puts on a Pirates uniform, I root for it as a player. Now, person-wise and all that other jazz, have your own thoughts about that all you want. And I mean that not in Derek Shelton, but to other people. But when you're discussing, again, what kind of manager that this team needs and where they are as a team right now, I do think the arrow is pointing up on this team. I do think it will continue to point up on this team, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I just wonder where the mindset that the Pirates have is right now with Derek Shelton. Is he getting a full crack at another season? Is the leash going to be short? I mean, how much time do you give this? I mean, you guys heard me mention it earlier, 5 years that we've had Derek Shelton now. 5. So how much more time do you give this? Because there's a lot of other factors, again, that have played a large part in this. I acknowledge that. But as a fan, I just don't know how good of a look it is to continue to hold on to this manager that you've had now for, again, 5 seasons, and you've had more than 10 losses from 500 in all of those years. And one of those years wasn't even a full season. And as you heard me mention earlier with the public endorsing of him, I don't understand that either. I'm not saying publicly criticize him from the team standpoint. But what I am saying is make it well known that his job is not safe. Make it well known that he has to post results. He has to start winning games. He has to start putting this team in the right place at the right time and keep them in contention. Because I look around the playoffs this year and I'm looking and I'm like, dude, Pirates rotation is better than what the Dodgers have right now. Pirates rotation was better than what not the Royals, the Tigers overall had. They had Skubal, but that was it. Then you look at the Mets. They had a better rotation than the Mets. They had a better rotation than a lot of teams in the postseason this year. So if you're telling me that all Derek Shelton has to do as a manager next year is put them in a place where they can be in contention in September and let the rest fall into place, let's get there, man. That's really what I want to see. I want to see Derek Shelton succeed. I want to see him prove the doubters wrong. But going back on the question I said earlier, is he the guy or not? I think that's the question that will be answered in 2025. He's either going to prove that he is or prove that he isn't. And we'll have to just wait and see. Folks, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Find me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can find the show on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast. With that said, folks, have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my birthday, but until tomorrow, I'll see you on the flip side.